Hey everyone, I wanted to talk to you today about CBUSA. It's the industry's leading group purchasing organization. They make it possible for home builders like me and probably many of you to get better pricing and grow the bottom line. I'll be joining the new local chapter here in Minneapolis, and I look forward to working with the other top builders in the area to drive down material costs. CBUSA has chapters all over the US, and they're continuing to expand every year. You can learn more about the benefits and apply for membership by going to cbusa.us/learn. That's cbusa.us/learn. Additionally, if you want to hear the backstory about CBUSA, you can listen to Curious Builder episode number 26 with Ryan Lipchek. This episode is brought to you by Helmuth and Johnson, a top Minnesota law firm ranging from individuals to emerging startups to multinational Fortune 500 companies. Focusing on transactional law, litigation, and appeals, Helmuth and Johnson attorneys are leaders in their field. David Helmuth and Chad Johnson joined forces 30 years ago in 1994 with the goal of creating a premier law firm capable of handling complex and challenging cases efficiently and effectively. Today, Helmuth and Johnson rank among the top 15 largest law firms in Minnesota with more than 70 Twin City lawyers serving clients in more than 30 legal practice areas. They offer a full suite of legal services to clients without sacrificing their original commitment to providing responsive and affordable legal representation. To learn more, go to their website, www.hjlawfirm.com. Today on the Curious Builder podcast, we had Charlie and Colby from Charlie & Co. Design in, and just a great conversation. As usual, we did not get to nearly all the questions that we wanted to about business, but I really appreciate how deep we went, really about the philosophy of running a business, how you work together, and really how we exceed a client's expectation through communication and really making sure we're empowering everybody on the team. So for a great listen, stay tuned now for the full episode. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I am joined with Charlie Simmons and Colby Mattson from Charlie & Co. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
All right, you guys are some amazing talents in the architecture world. You guys are home designers here locally in Minnesota, and Colby and I have been friends for a while, and Charlie, you and I have, I think, only met a handful of times, but I always see your work in magazines and all over the place. They're very aspirational homes. So I'm really excited to have you both on. Why don't we start a little bit, especially for those that aren't aware of who you are. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what clientele you sort of service, and we'll dive a little bit into your origin story, which I think is pretty interesting, and we'll just kind of go from there. So, Colby, why don't you kick us off?
Well, we're what we consider a medium-sized firm in the residential world. There's 9 of us currently. Charlie and I are the 2 principals, and we have a handful of project managers and young staff, architectural associates who support the team and the clients. The firm started in 2008, which we can kind of jump into the origin story later.
Great timing, by the way.
Yeah,
solid move.
Charlie can jump into that.
Way to go on your own on that one.
But we do specialize in the high-end residential market. It hasn't always been that way. We started out a little on the lower price point side, and then as we've kind of grown and the reputation's grown, we've been fortunate enough that our clients have grown with us. So,
I think that's funny just for myself. I talked a lot about it on the podcast. We just actually rebranded our company, 3 years ago. And at the time, it was like you look back and you're like, I have become a different company than I was. Yeah. And usually it's your spouse. In this case, it was my wife who was like, hey, I think you need to update your graphics and your branding because your clients, to your point, Colby, have taken us to a place that you didn't even know you were at. And we know because we see each other every day in the mirror. You see your own work, you sort of lose that zoomed out perspective. And I really appreciate those in our group or those in our peers, colleagues that can kind of say, wow, hey, you guys have really stepped it up. And so anyway, I can relate very much to, hey, your journey as your clients have sort of elevated even what you do and what you can represent.
Yeah. And I think there's certain aspects of a business that carries through those, of whether it's a work ethic, kind of your ethos for the business that can stay pure in a lot of ways. But it's a much different company. When we started, it was, Charlie started and it was on his own for years. And then I joined him. But even then, when there's 2 of us, it's a small firm, and there's actually a lot of freedom to that. It's kind of a fun, invigorating time. But then the company grows.
We kind of joke around about just even the name of the company, Charlie & Company. It's kind of be honest with you, I've always thought it was kind of a dumb name. Truth be told, it was a temporary name. It was an opportunity presented itself to me, and I jumped ship and got to come up with a name because I got a client, and thought this is only going to be for 6 months, right? And then I'm just going to rebrand. I'm not going to do business cards. I'm not going to do letterhead. This is just an temporary LLC, no problem. Well, fast forward 3 years later, and now I got to hire. And of course, Colby was always going to be the first choice in that department. Well, let's just wait, and then we'll talk about rebranding when things start happening a little bit more. Then fast forward a couple more years, and we're like, okay, now we got to start hiring more employees. And then, okay, we'll shorten it up. Charlie and Company. It's C and Co. Charlie and
I only get 2
Colby.
letters.
He only gets 2 letters.
I've only heard 2
C-O.
letters so far. So,
He's the Co.
That's our running joke. But it is. It's all of a sudden you look down, and I think part of that is just the nature of the way that we work is a very heads down, grind it out, especially in those early years when, the going wasn't all that great.
Well, I mean, every builder any business can relate to being scrappy, right?
Mm.
And I don't care who you are. I mean, it's hard to be successful as a business if you don't know how to be scrappy. And I've had so many people on the podcast that did start their company in and around within, let's say, a 3-year window, plus and minus of 2008. And even for myself, I was, I started in 2005. We just celebrated our 20th, but I was too small to really have anything to lose. And so, so many of your peers and those, several weight classes above you are gone. And before you know it, they're looking at you like, hey, young buck, you're still around. It looks like you're building a house. And so you sort of benefit. If you can make it through that difficult time, coming out on the other side, you kind of position yourself in sort of, elite company.
Somebody had asked me years ago if, because we did launch this thing right before the bottom fell out in 2008. And it was literally in January of 2008. And what would you do differently? Would you have postponed it, or could you have, if you had a time machine, would you have sped it up a year to establish yourself a little bit more? And I wouldn't change a single darn thing. It was scary. It was really scary. It's like, okay, now I have to come up with money for my mortgage and car payments and all of that. And you're like, wait a minute, I don't get a paycheck anymore unless I earn. That fear makes you hungry. And, knocking on past clients' doors, or once the word got out that you're on your own, people end up kind of gravitating back to you. Hey, I heard you started your own business. We're thinking about maybe doing a kitchen remodel. And you just build off of that. You accept every opportunity that comes your way, big or small, and you do the best you can to build a reputation, to build off of the reputation.
Did you ever find, and I'll say that I found this for myself, I can think of 3 individuals in particular where they chose me because I was young. I think they saw something they said, okay, this is a young builder trying to make it.
Hungry.
Hungry, whether they wanted to support you, whether it spoke to someone in their career that kind of gave them a leg up at one time. Do you feel like that when you first started, you had opportunities like that where people chose you because of, not your inexperience, because you were experienced.
Yeah.
It was at the maturation state of your business. They're like, hey, we want you to succeed. We believe in small business. We want to help.
100%. And not only was it from my end, but when Colby joined me, he had some past clients that followed him as well. And that just speaks to, you work hard, you treat your clients well, you do the best job you can, and hopefully that turns into something down the road. One of the things that we are most proud of is that we have a lot of repeat clients. And we've been doing this long enough now where now we're on generation 2, and we're doing homes for the children of past clients. And that is, for us, the most gratifying part of this, that they continue to want to work with us, and they're even trusting us with their children's homes as well. So I love that part.
Well, we joke also that it's to the point where the repeat clients are not a problem, but when a repeat client calls, we might have a really long wait list. They're going to get the attention. They have to. They're a repeat client. We know who they are. I mean, we can kind of segue at some point into the idea of trust, that clients are asking of us and that we're asking of clients, both big deals. And once you get to know somebody on a personal level, such as a client, we're designing their homes. I mean, that's nothing more personal. And so that's a big ask. And so once you have that trust level with somebody, it's, pretty special.
I agree. I mean, I think it's very akin as well to, I would say that the home building business and everything around it is very akin to even like getting married and a planning your wedding. I guess actually it is more analogous than I want it to be, because people do, as the average statistic in the United States is like 50% and divorce. So
I think probably more than 50%.
Probably more, but I mean, now that I think about it, humorously, as an architect, you're building multiple homes for people, and maybe sometimes you've had that experience where it has been, even with a remarriage, that analogy is starting to fall apart. But the point of it is it's super emotional.
Yeah.
And I do, as a business owner, sometimes. I wouldn't change anything. I mean, to you, like you, Charlie, I mean, your evolution and your history kind of makes you who you are. Plus, none of us get a chance to rewrite our history anyway, so what's the point?
Right.
We can only try to rewrite our future. But I guess my point in bringing it up is it is very emotional. And we often, because I feel like sometimes the podcast becomes a little bit of therapy when you're talking to other builders, like, sometimes you get really stressed because of, and not that you can't have good stress too, but it's just stressful because it's so emotional.
Yeah.
That being said, you're speaking about kind of the high hanging fruit, which is like these wonderful relationships that are that type of enduring relationship is one of the reasons why I think the construction world is so sticky and why people do it. I had a client the other day, I built her home a couple years ago, and she is such a big fan of us. And she said, hey, if you can ever sell my house, I would just love to build with you again. We spent 2 years together, and, it's not every relationship that like that, but I mean, every time I see her, it's a big hug, and she's telling me how much she loves her home. And it is really deeply gratifying on a deep emotional level to know that somebody loves the process and the home, knowing that it's not perfect. I mean, it's messy. I mean, you're building something outside in the elements for a couple of years. It's art, not science.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, though, I think, on the relationship front. So if when you have repeat clients and you're so invested into these they start off as professional relationships, business relationships, obviously, so they're clients of yours. But then over time, becomes very personal, right? So for some clients, you just get a connection. And those are the clients that eventually come back at some point. But there's that added level of stress that, okay, I can't screw this thing up, or, I got to make this work because they came back, and then they come back for a third time or a fourth time and a fifth time. And there's always, for me personally, there's always something in the back of my hand that I got to work harder than I normally would. I gotta do the extra 20 miles on this thing instead of the extra 5 miles on it. And in reality, I think that just they're coming to you because of who you are and what you did, and don't change. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, and one of the things we talk with a lot of our team about, and with clients as well, is the design part is actually the fun, easy part in some ways. That's what we went to school for. That's what we really nerd out about. It's the process. And that's the thing that I think, if you go through that process with a client and they come back, a great project, no matter how beautiful, and let's say there really wasn't much of a personal connection, they just see it as a product. When you're going to get the big fans is when you go through all of that, everything you just described. You're kind of going through battle with them, and together, and we're all doing it together. And that kind of, it's the same thing with builders and interior designers, landscape architects. We're all a team, and we're going through this thing. And it's the term we use is million-piece jigsaw puzzle. Never been built before. Our part of the role is trying to get the instruction manual started. And it's a lot of times, depending on what people want to spend, maybe we can't put the full instruction manual together. They don't want to spend the money for a really thorough set. But that's our goal, is to be putting together the best instruction manual possible to be able to make the process enjoyable. Historically, I'm sure you've heard it and seen it of people talk about the horror stories of building, and it absolutely doesn't have to be that way. It can be super enjoyable, not stress-free, but really enjoyable.
I think the biggest thing that I've learned in my 20 years is clear communication. In the beginning, Charlie, you mentioned you take everything and anything because you're just a hungry, scrappy dog, and you need to. And you learn a lot that way too. But lately, the last couple of years, I've really, and I'm not perfect at it, but trying to identify your ideal client. Yeah. And I think it comes from a number of things. The brand, we talked a little bit about brand, what work you're representing out there, like your aspirational work, what do you want to do? But I think a lot of it's communication. I had the other day, someone came in, someone was talking about Honey Hill, and it was a young couple, really nice people. It was all green flags for them, but their budget on that particular one was like 1.7. And no matter what I'm sorry, no matter what I do, I can't get
it's probably a 2, 3, 2, 5 minimum package in that neighborhood. And I felt terrible because like the builder from 20 years ago is saying like, man, you used to be able to build a house for like, the 400,000.
Yeah.
You can't even build one. You kind of
You have $1 million house?
yeah, wow, crazy, right? And so it's like you have this recency factor. I do. You look back thinking about, even though I price out homes every day, I still, being an internal optimist, think it should be maybe less, or you should get in more. And so the client isn't wrong in their expectations, because I'm in the industry and I feel the same way.
But I think that that feeling that you have, that you just described, it should be less. Well, it could be less. It could be more. But if your initial thought is it should be less, it's because you're advocating for your client. We look at it the same way. When we get bids back on our projects, you're looking like, oh boy, we're over by 10, 15%. They're not going to be happy. Well, before we even sit down with the client, we sit down with the builder, and how do we get this thing down into a more palatable number so we don't lose the project? And because you're advocating, you care, you want the project to be done. We don't want to have a super expensive pile of paper. It's just a paperweight, right? You want it to be built because you're proud of what you do on the creative side, but you also care about that client, and you want them to not just throw your plans in the garbage and say, well, we can't afford what we want to do and we're not going to do it.
Well, it's managing expectations too.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be certain things where it's a lot of parties involved, and does the client, where some of those dollars are going, does the client care about certain things or not? Do they care about triple pane windows? No, maybe not so much. Okay, there's some easy low-hanging fruit to find the right budget. So it really comes down to that matchmaking of trying to understand their priorities. We talk a lot in the office about this idea of how to set your mentality when designing for somebody. We're not designing houses. I mean, there are firms out there that have a style, a very particular style, and they repeat it. And that doesn't mean it's bad. A lot of cases it's very good, but it's repeatable. And so when those clients are going to them, they want that product. They want that, call it an iPhone, right? They know what they're getting. We say, a lot of times we will talk about client first, project second. So always put your head where the client is. What are their values? Is this a move that's going to cost money that they don't care about? Because as designers, we're creatives. We see a lot of different things. Oh, this would be really cool, right? This would be a great detail. They might not care about it, and now we're just spending their money on something that we care about and not that they don't necessarily care about. In a lot of instances, there's a lot of overlap. We think we can get to know people pretty quickly. We've been doing it a long time, and to your point, you start to learn how to read people. And there's certain keywords that we pick up on. A lot of times, Charlie and I will, when we're doing interviews, we like to interview together because we're both listening for different things. Or we're watching facial expressions and really trying to figure out what motivates somebody. And then that will help us decide, are we a good fit for them? Are they a good fit for us? And I do think when you're interviewing, it's very much a two-way street.
Yeah, I think communication, is probably, it comes up over and over again. And I think it's the most valuable commodity that both parties would share. And a big part of it, just in Minnesota anyway, we have such a strong builder market here with the Parade Homes just celebrated their 75th anniversary.
It's amazing.
It is pretty incredible, the advocacy there, and just what, is quote considered normal. You go around the country and, there's places that don't even have the Parade Homes. Like from Minnesota, you'd be like, what? And like we might have too many tours. We have 7 tours, right? So it's a little much. But my point is, a lot of times if someone's coming to me, the builder, and they don't have an architect or interior designer on staff, a lot of what I'm doing is what you're saying, Colby. I'm evaluating their personality, their demeanor. Style's somewhat important, but frankly, everyone at a high strata could, frankly, in my opinion, design pretty much what they want. So it's really, value. What do they value? But a lot of it is, I think demeanor. I like to meet new architects and to understand what is their value statement, because then it gets me excited. Then now when I meet, Susan Johnson, oh, hey, Susan. Oh, man, she's going to really hit it off with Charlie because he's smiling. He must know Susie Johnson. So anyway.
We know a lot of Johnsons.
Yeah. Well, no, that's right. I think the matchmaking and saying, hey, put our name in the hat, and from that point forward, let the client figure out who, and we tell clients, I would much rather a client go interview a whole bunch of firms and know that we're the right fit, as opposed to being spoon-fed a project and saying, oh, I think you guys will work out. Well, I think the hardest or the most amount of homework that a client needs to do is when they're interviewing. If you put together the right team, everything falls into place. And if you pick people for the wrong reasons, whether it be, hey, I want the cheapest, fees, or, I need it now. I'm going to pick somebody because they say they're available right now. Those are generally recipes for disaster. We tell clients when they're interviewing, they're like, oh, we're not really interviewing somebody else. And often we've been in
You should.
We said, go meet a couple people. If you think we're great, they'll say, oh no, this feels really good. We want you to know that. Go interview some other people. And, and then if you know, then you really know. And that, to me, those are the clients that become repeat clients because they said, oh, no, we did our due diligence.
They picked you and they went all in on the relationship. I like that. I think that's interesting. I think a big part of it too, both with architecture, but I think with builders too, if I am going to compete against someone else, I want to know we're at the same strata.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so it's like, if they're going to ask me for a recommendation, well, then good. I'll recommend other builders that I would perceive at either a higher status than me, or at the same status. And if your value proposition doesn't align with mine, I'm happy to recommend somebody that I would perceive that it maybe would. Yeah. My goal, to your point, Colby, I want to assemble the dream team, and it can be done. It all starts back to communication.
Yeah,
I think two parts. Go ahead.
It's when we talk about trying to compare apples to apples. Quite often what we find when we have a project that doesn't have a builder assigned to it, that will give us who are the top 4 builders on your website. And we're looking at all these pictures. Who did that house? Who's the project team? Who did that house? Who did that house? Well, here are the 3 or 4 that we work with the most in that past handful of years. Okay, we'll talk to them. I'm like, well, but hold on a second. We don't know if this is a good fit for various reasons. And then inevitably, when they're doing their own research, they'll come back with Joe Blow Builder. And we don't even know who Joe Blow Builder is. We don't have a relationship with them. We don't know what the expectations are, what the deliverables are on their part, how they do their business, how much they charge. Let us vet this. Oh, no, a friend of a friend built a house for them, and we thought it was great, and I'm sure they're going to do a great job. But you're not comparing apples to apples. When you get those bids back, they are going to be vastly different. The expectations from our set of documents and our specifications are, we have relationships with certain builders, right? And they know what they're expecting from us, and we know what we're expecting from them, right, for a final product. When you throw these curveballs in there, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But that just goes back to you advocate for the client the best way that you can. And if we have no problem working with new interior designers, landscape architects, cabinet companies, doesn't matter. As long as we know that they can do the job the way that we are expecting and the client is expecting to.
It's kind of like to go healthcare. It's kind of like do no harm. You guys are, it's got Hippocratic oath for medicine, right? And it's like, hey, you could do this, but, it could be a fatal move. But hey, this is a doctor I really recommend. Let's get a second opinion. I think that's good perspective. Again, it goes back to us communicating that early on in my career. I either didn't know enough or I didn't advocate enough for the client to really protect them from themselves. And I look back at like the relationships that you had the most success with, or the ones that were the best projects, and there were ones where everyone was really aligned on the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and even going back to one of your earlier statements, we talk about value. We talk about value a lot, and it's the kind of different definitions of value. One is we want the client to be getting good value, not only out of our fees, but out of the design and the construction cost, right? Of saying, hey, are these dollars going into impactful areas that, does a client really care about some of the invisible dollars? They might not. Some of them do. And then the other one is we want clients to value what we're doing. And that's where you talk about there's always kind of a lower build or a lower cost solution in everything, whether it be build, the design, any of those, furnishings. And if they don't value the aspects that we're bringing, our process, the thoroughness, the thoughtfulness of it, and they say, and there's certain terms in interviews that we'll hear, and you say, yep, I know this isn't going to be a good fit. And typically it's hey, we just need this drafted up, or hey, the real quick, or schedule, and it's just like, probably not the right fit. And that's not to say that there's not a good fit. It's not a bad project. It's just a bad fit because there's a massive amount of talent in this town at all price points.
The biggest red flag that we hear in interviews is, so have you talked to other team members or prospective team members? Well, what do you mean? Well, have you talked to a builder yet? Have you talked to a landscape architect? How about interior design? We design things on the inside too, but we create the house, they create the home, so to speak. The furniture, the lighting, drapery. We don't do that stuff. Oh, you know what? My wife's going to do it. She's got an Instagram account. Uh-oh.
And that's a tough one. And occasionally it works out. We've had some clients that have done a lot of their own design work. And it's the anomaly. It's impressive when they do pull it off. It's rare.
I mean, I've done it before, early, especially I think not in the last 10 years, but early on in my career, right? You would allow that, and then you learn a few that just went really south, and then you really try to explain to the client on the front end. I had a builder who was just in town for the Contractor Coalition, and he had somebody that, really high-end home down in Arizona, and the client said, oh, we don't need an interior designer. And we don't want to pay their fee. I think, let's just say this example is $150,000. And he said, that's fine. He goes, then we will invoice you for $150,000 to do that work. And they were like, well, what do you mean? We're like, well, somebody has to do it. Mm-hmm. And, the work, there's no such thing really as free. Mm-hmm. And so he pulled out a design spec book and he said, this interior designer on this home, it's this thick. Everything is spec, elevations, just beyond. This isn't even architecture. This is interior design, right? You know what I'm talking about. And the homeowner's like, oh, and they're like, yeah, if this is if you want your home to look like the homes that you've seen, I can't do that without my architecture partner, my interior design, all the things that you just said, Charlie. Yeah. And I think I just love the way he illustrated that to kind of like open up their eyes. I'll have to ask him. I don't know if he ended up building for that client or not, but I think because I get asked a lot, we'll get through architecture phase, and usually the architect partners we're aligning with, they know it on the front end, but inevitably costs come up. To your point, things are, we have to value engineer, we have to move things around, but I'll often get a sidebar conversation and they'll say, hey, do we really need the architect to stay on for construction administration, CA, right?
Yeah.
And again, being a team member, I'm like, well, do you, the home that you came through or the home that you want, in order for that to be there, we as a team, need to be there. I mean, you don't get to the fourth quarter and be like, I don't think we need our wide receivers anymore. You know what? I think we could lose our quarterback. Yeah, we don't really need him anymore. I'm like, what? This is crazy. Actually, that's the first time I thought of that analogy.
No, we've used the track analogy too of is this a relay race? Where it's like, do you really just hand off the baton on again, going back to a 1,000,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and expect the next person to just be like, yep, I know every, with these houses, they're so dialed in often that you push down one spot, it pops up 3 other spots. You solve one problem, it's going to create 4 others. And who knows that better than the people who drew it? And so often, early in the business, we would do a lot of partial set, what we call partial sets. This is basically take it to permit, and people just didn't want to spend the fee. And again, you're young and you say, we'll take whatever. We're happy to have it. And
it's what the client thought they wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then we stop and, we're not getting paid for CA. But again, we're passionate about it. So maybe we try to get there a couple of times, as much as you can. And inevitably, like 2 or 3 things change. And all of a sudden, like somebody moved to soffit. And you're like, well, okay, everything was aligned. And now, it's a little bit of chaos. And, oh, yeah, I guess we didn't really think of that. It's like, yeah, that's part of the process. Because what we're not doing is, especially on a partial set, you're not drawing every single thing. A lot of it is like, okay, we have a pretty good idea, but we're going to have to figure that out, in construction, or that's where we're consider ourselves a pretty document-heavy firm. We're planners. We would much rather anticipate everything and plan for it than kind of just gamble, roll the dice.
I mean, I heard a story just recently where a framer was on site and they changed the soffit, the head height for whatever reason, and they had not engaged the architect for the CA, and they came out later and they're like, well, yeah, that was drawn that way, so it lined up with all your windows on the 360 architecture. It's a simple thing that most builders would catch, but obviously this PM didn't. And we talked about kind of hilariously that that if you're used to making changes in the field as a builder, and you do so as your career evolves, if you don't keep the team informed of your changes, it can create some major chaos. And I really appreciate good architecture partners because I love your brains. I'd love to like, to me, this braid is like this amazing thing of like, you guys are thinking so far down the road and what it looks like and how it operates. And because you've spent so much time doing that, myself as a builder, like I want to get it done. And like you need a driver. I mean, you need a cheerleader to get it done. But like the idea that you have the game plan all orchestrated out is a beautiful thing.
But you also have to be a realist about this. I mean, we're not robots. And as a builder, we can draw a perfectly detailed drawing of how steel is in a concrete beam pocket or something, right? And if it's off by 1/8 of an inch, hey, that happens, right? Well, how do we solve the problem of it being off 1/8 of an inch? Well, we drew the detail, and it's in our brain somewhere, and we're the perfect person to help figure out how to solve the issue. It's just life.
And to that point, though, too, I think, when you think about how you're building a business, especially as a design firm, you want to be, we talk about being client friendly, but it's also being builder friendly, all the partner friendly, right? Of saying, okay, we often will tell people we want to bring in the builder and the interior designer as early as possible because we are not the only ones with ideas. This is a huge team effort, and we would just rather just draw it once. So let's get people in early enough so we don't have to backtrack, right? And get all those great ideas. And the other part about being on site is I want to go talk to that framer who's been framing for 35 years because they have a lot of knowledge, and to be able to look at a set of drawings and they say, oh, I think we would have done it we've done it this way. And we might not always implement those ideas, but it sure does help a lot of our younger staff, getting out on site, hearing the old timers, talk about it.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19.5 years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella Windows. Find more at pellanorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella Windows.
Every industry has its stereotypes, and I'd like to challenge one of the architectural ones because it's not been my experience at all. We're working with we work with a number of high-end architects, and one in particular right now, they had certain reputation, and I brought them some ideas, and they were very open to it. And recently at Build Buzz, we had a tradesman in the audience write in a question. The question was, as a tradesperson, let's just say they're an electrician, I don't know, and they said, how do we get to be a part of the process? And I responded to the question saying, to me, it'd be a huge red flag if who you're working with is not open to discussion.
Yeah.
And where I'm going with this is I think there's a perception of architects we know best, we know what it is. I've not met a single I can't think of one that I've met that thinks that way. Every architect and designer that I've met, yourselves included, are curious. I mean, it's the namesake of the podcast, pun intended. But I find that the curious people are the ones that want to keep knowing more. And I am really actually impressed with how willing architects are to engage with people. You just mentioned Colby, hey, I want to talk to this framer who's been doing it for 35 years. He's probably forgotten more than you'll ever know about, whatever, assembly systems. Now, you know things about design he's not aware of, but as a team, we're better.
Here's a perfect example we work with a lot of different builders, right? And each builder has their framing crew that is used to reading plans or dimensions a certain way. Some of them, for example, when we're dimensioning a plan, like to have rough opening, right? All right, so window size is X, here's a rough opening, and then you move on down with the dimensions. Some like to go to center lines. Okay, sure. We have those once the builder is selected, all right, how do you want us to dimension our plans to make it most readable for you and your team? Those are the simple things. This is all about a collaboration and getting the best product at the end, right?
I mean, I think that's really thoughtful. I also think, as a builder, you just mentioned you encourage your clients to interview a few architecture partners, a few build partners. We will often, depending on the demeanor, we'll usually have them sit down with one or two architects, one or two designers. Sometimes it's just clear, like, no, this is your person. Like, this is it. And, if you feel differently, let me know. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. I connect with these people. But I'm looking at, one of the things that we do as well is, we'll have, and this is a timing thing too, but we'll have like a couple different framers. But a big part of framing is scheduling. Yeah. And so, I've had a scenario that you just mentioned, Charlie, where it's like what if you had one that was like center line outside, it'd be sort of funny, like, okay, which framer do you get? Okay, we actually have to redraw the plans for you. I bet it's just more humorous, like how this process would go.
Yeah, that's happened. And, it's where all of a sudden you're like, well, we thought it was going to be this framer. And again, to our point, we want to be efficient for our clients. And so it's like, I don't have to want to redimension the plans. But it's having that. And then it's also just, we're passionate about what we do. And it would be arrogant to think that the framers aren't passionate about what this isn't just a job for, especially in the residential world. These are small businesses. They're grinding it out just like everybody else. And I think going back to kind of the business startup and when you're starting small and starting in a really tough time period, there's a humility that is, I think, ingrained in our business that it's not about us. It's not about a particular style. We work really hard at listening. And I think we've become pretty well known for having a pretty diverse portfolio. And I think a lot of people like to say that. Is it an iteration of something? But we kind of pursue new things. And I think it makes us better designers and it makes us better listeners because it's not we want to use our professionalism, our experience to help advocate for the clients, but it's a journey. It's a process with them. And some of that comes even from the way that we work, whether that be, we do a lot of 3D modeling, as do a lot of our peers and competitors. But that's been a way for us to visually communicate with clients a lot better. And it actually has fast-forwarded the process quite a bit to build that trust faster. We can talk about ideas visually, and we know that the clients can understand it a lot more than the 2D drawings. And so what we found recently is that the 2D drawings really now become a tool for the builder, right, much less for the client. Clients have no interest in looking at the 2D drawings.
They don't even know what they're looking at half the time.
They nodding and saying, yeah, I think that's good and I trust you. Which, going back to the early parts of our careers, it kind of opens your eyes to be like how much trust people were putting in you. Because it was clear that they didn't know.
They didn't know it. I always say you were lucky if you had one, but oftentimes you didn't have either. And that's where you can see like, semi-production homes or semi-custom. If you can bring somebody, people are so much more comfortable going into a home that's already been built and saying, what can I change? The problem is, and I was just having this conversation with a client yesterday, is that the land, we talk about the client, we talk about the architect, the designer, the builder, who has a huge say in this that can't speak? The site. And, the site has in the sun. And there's so much, and I think, and I get kind of geeky about it, but like, I think that's the fun part is like understanding as a craftsperson. I think it's my ADHD that I think that's why I pick building. I don't know how you could be in building and not have some form of attention to deficit order because every project is so different. Yeah. That's kind of why I like it. Yeah. Is because I don't think I could do the same thing day in and day out.
Well, I think that goes back to the curiosity. You brought it up just a few minutes ago. I think to be in custom, high-end residential, whether you're a builder, designer, interior designer, landscape, doesn't matter. If you're in this industry, this niche, you have to be curious. You just unless it's just for money, right? And you're just going to pump out the same darn design over and over and over again. That's boring. Who wants to do that? Colby was mentioning that we have a pretty diverse portfolio. That is by design. There are some firms that don't do remodels. There are some firms that only do remodels. Well, we do both. Some only do super modern stuff. Some only do traditional. We do it all because we're curious people. If a client comes to you and says, I have a 100-year-old house, but I want to have a modern addition onto it, and here are the reasons why, and it sounds like an intriguing project. Well, I haven't done one of those before. Right. I'm all in. Let's go.
I've mentioned that before. Or someone says they want to have, I was like, if you want to do a really cool sauna, like I'm in. Like, let's do it. I like saunas. But like, you find something you relate to or something that's really unique. Size and budget or I should say size and dollar price is not really what drives me. That is the consequence of whatever the client wants. If you're willing to pay me for my time and what I'm going to do, I'm fine with doing something really small, like a playhouse, a bunkhouse, like anything. I find that super, it like scratches that itch.
I was talking to another builder a few months ago about the same thing. I get more excited now in my career of saving our clients money than I do spending their money. Like, oh, I really want to show you this really cool detail. It's 4 times what it probably should be, but it's really cool. No, I'm more excited about, hey, there's a different way of doing this. And here, visually, this is how it would affect what we're doing, but it's going to save you 50% for whatever that thing is. I get excited about that stuff.
I just like unique things. We did one the other day where it was a bonus room, and I usually don't, to be very clear to those who are listening, I am not a design build firm. At one point in time, I didn't realize that, and I advertised myself that way anyway, just so I thought it sounded cooler. Right. But anyway, we did this bonus room space. I actually did design. We did this rock climbing room, but only because I have a lot of experience in that realm, and so it was super fun. And that was the home I took this client through yesterday. And I walk in, it was kind of like you feel like a proud father. You're like, I had a huge part to make this room. It was a kid's room, but my point was I was so jazzed about it. And I feel like whether you're a tradesman, the electrician, the cabinet maker, the builder, the architect, if you get to have your voice be heard by the client and then it actually creates something, there's something super amazing about everyone that's a part of the home process. You feel it's so tangible in a world of zeros and ones and digital currency and all these other things, which there's nothing wrong with those things. But when you can drive by a home and say, I helped build that. Like that, there's legacy. There's something that happens in you that it's pretty cool to be attached to that. And I feel my framers. I love it when I see my framers walking off the job site and taking pictures and videos and sending it to their family. Like that is super neat and very special.
And we should everyone involved should be really proud of that. And I think that comes back to the listening and making people feel heard. People are waking up early. They're coming in on weekends. And some of that comes back to the client too. Of the clients can have a huge part in making people feel welcome in the home and valued. And we have clients that who are really appreciative of the entire team, and they'll show up to the job site, with pizzas and donuts, and man, that is a really easy way to get your crews working hard. People want to work hard for people they like.
Oh man,
and that's when we were younger, and we're still the young kids on the block.
No.
Somehow they disappeared. But no,
I'm still thinking about pizza and donuts.
Yeah, that's true. When we were younger, you don't know the red flags. You don't know what. And sometimes it's not even red flags. Sometimes it's just not the right fit. And as we become older and more wise, I guess you're able. Saying no is probably the hardest skill that I learned once I joined Charlie. You get a potential client call and you're just like, Charlie had been into it for a few years before me, and he had started building that, like, settle down, and also it's also when we're interviewing against people, we still talk, a project's not a project until it is, right? You can be excited about it, but then you have to kind of say, okay, let's get through the process,
get through the contract and get a retainer, and then it's a project.
But I think it's just that discipline and being able to slow down and say, okay, we design really elaborate homes. We do hard things, and we're very particular in the way we do that. And I think part of the reason that we've had success is we have a lot of conversations about designing the business, right? And I think that's really important. It's not just as being we tell, our project managers and our staff in terms of communication, we want to be proactive, not reactive. So I always want us to be the ones emailing or calling the clients first. You don't want them calling and say, hey, just want to check in and, where are we at, right? So we really push our team to be proactive in our communication. And I think the same thing goes for the way that the business has been designed. Aside from the name, that obviously that just happened, but
you guys are still working. Hey, someday you might actually change it.
The greatest name ever.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've talked about this of like we feel lucky to have been successful over the last 15 years. There's a little bit of luck involved in it. I think it's stupid to think that there's not some luck.
Time and chance happens to us all.
But the part of it is, why is the business successful, and why are we, successful as partners too, is we kind of joke around. We typically go to lunch 2 to 3 times a week together, and that's our time to download, and make sure that Charlie and I are on the same page, that we communicate well, together, because we're not working on the same projects. We're working on different projects with different staff members, and making sure that, our work isn't overlapping or overburdening any particular staff. And so I think being just intentional, and we approach our work that way, and
having a business partner is much like a marriage in a lot of ways, right? You're 2 different individuals. You have 2 different ideas of how a task could get done. And then just talk it through and figure out what's the best for the business, right? And
do you find, I think that was one of maybe we'll switch to some of the business stuff, because I think we can apply it to all of ours. We've had, business partners on, we've had father-sons, we've had husband and wives. What are some, I guess let's continue this thread, Charlie. What are some pros and cons of having a business partner, and even why, let's go back to the very beginning. You guys had both worked at another well-known firm together. You had launched out on your own. You brought Colby on why Colby? Why was he your first hire? What was it about him? And was he immediately a partner, or was he a hire? And maybe talk us through the difference and how that
the background was, we, at a sort of the 800-pound gorilla in town here, I was there for about 9 years. And the last year kind of felt like I hit the glass ceiling, so to speak. And always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Just wanted to create. I wanted to make something, make a business, right? And I sink or swim, right? It's up to you. So I've always had that notion rattling in the back of my brain. And then an opportunity presented itself, and if it's not now, never going to happen.
Is that pretty common? Because you see a lot of the times, it's analogous to building a project manager, where a project manager, I'm not sure how it happens, but somehow they'll get a client and they'll say, I'm going to start on my own, and that's that first job. Is that akin to architecture? When you see,
I think mostly the friends and competitors that we have out there, very analogous. An opportunity presented itself, and you either take it or you don't. It's up to you, right? But while we were working at this previous firm, on every project that I was assigned, we had a little bit of say on who was going to be on the project team. They were rather large projects. So you would have 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 people on there. And I would always seek out Colby to be on my team, because he's a hard worker. And he was a young intern at the time, but he had drive. And he was always looking for an answer. Even if he didn't know what the answer was, it was the journey to get there. And that's a rare trait in life, to be honest with you, not only in our business. And we just got along and became friends. We did a lot of out-of-work stuff with other folks in the firm, and we just became really good friends and began to respect each other and each other's skill sets. He is totally different than I am from a personality standpoint. But we're both curious people, and we both have work ethic. So if you have somebody that complements you, not only from, we'll call it a personality standpoint, but also on a business standpoint, right? And this gets into the business side. I have, after practicing for 25 years now, 26, I am enamored with the business side of what we do. And I have been, one, because I started the business by myself in my dining room. But as it's grown and shifted, evolved over the past couple of decades, I have really appreciated sort of the nuances about the business side, the accounting side, wear a lot of different hats. I enjoy that just as much as I do designing homes. Now, conversely, Colby is very much technically savvy. So we kind of joke good cop, bad cop, and it's the term that everybody knows. But where I am technologically deficient with all the gizmos and gadgets and computers and software and all that, it's second nature to him. And so, and I don't want to speak for Colby, but I don't know if he loves the business side and the crunching the numbers and the accounting and all of that. I love it. I love numbers. They just sort of rattle in my brain. So I think when you have the two things that you need most, outside of the creativity, obviously, when you have the business acumen and then also the technological acumen, and then you can marry those together with two different, it's a perfect partnership.
And I think stylistic, part of the benefit is
I'm better.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. He likes more optica. But it's the notion of we are different designers, but we have similar values in the level of quality and thoughtfulness. And so, inevitably, where we're at now too is a lot of times Charlie and I on the front end in the schematic design, because it's more fun to design with people, right? Is lately what we've been doing, and it's over the years, it's kind of ebbed and flowed depending how busy we are, is doing these office design charrettes, working together. Because one of the things that when we were early in the career, we would work together, like on the same project, working together a lot. And when I was, the first employee and, even at the past firm, we were day to day passing drawings back and forth, really collaborating. Hey, what about this? No, that's stupid. This, let's try this. And that's really fun. It's really gratifying to design something with somebody as opposed to just being like, it's done, and then waiting for somebody to pat you on the back or whatever. That's just not gratifying.
I heard a quote that I really like, and it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
It's a T-shirt there.
Yeah. It's a bumper sticker.
For sure. But yeah, we've been looking for, trying to say, how can we, because we really enjoyed it. We really enjoy working together because we're slightly different. And because we are good friends, we're able to be pretty honest with each other. We were actually talking about this maybe, in the last year. We were like, when have we had a big blow up disagreement or even a medium size? And I don't think we have, partly because we are different enough that, to Charlie's point, I like the business side well enough, but I know he loves it. And so it's one of those things where if we're talking about something and maybe we disagree, I think we both look to it and say, I can tell he's really passionate about this topic. I'm going to take a second seat, to this. And I think that's really important.
It's just mutual respect is what it boils down to.
I often tell my clients, you don't want a bunch of yes people around.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, whether it's designer, architect, tradespeople, like, this doesn't always go well in my own household because I want someone to believe strongly in their idea. Right. And my wife might say something and I'll challenge her. And, she thinks it's confrontation. It's not. I just really believe quite strongly. And because maybe I'm a louder, more emotional arguer, and so anyway, where I'm bringing this up is that it's all relationship based.
Yeah.
And so I think when you, so I've had conversations with my interior designers, they'll bring something forward. I'll be like, oh, but I really like this. What do you think about that? And you can I kind of want to see how hard someone's going to fight for their idea. Yeah. And if they really fight for it, it actually reassures me. It kind of makes me, it relaxes me.
We've actually, in the past 6 months, we've picked up 2 projects that they had started working with other people. And they said, you know what? They felt like we were designing the house.
Yeah.
And we want people who are going to bring expertise and opinions. We talk about being a client first, project second, but that doesn't mean just always acquiescing to the client's, wishes, because it's part of our job is to protect clients from themselves sometimes, to saying, we really don't think it's a good idea. And you push back a couple of times. And at a certain point, you have to just say, I'm listening, I hear you, and it's your project. You've heard my warning, and we'll move on, right?
I had one of those recently that was pretty pie in my own face. And it was, I'll just describe it because you'll probably roll your eyes too. It was we all have designs that we're really proud of. And I'm really proud of this home and I'm really happy for the client. But there's some things about it that I'm not super excited about how it's going, right? And they're not allowing any CA work. So I couldn't have my right wingman, an architect, to help me out. And long story short, they wanted the refrigerator to be proud of the cabinets, and I wanted it to be all flush and nice. And long story short, it had to have a 2-inch gap around it. It was sticking proud. I offered to pay for it. And the homeowner said, no, because you'll just screw me somewhere else. And I said, wow. I said, if you really think that about me, why are you even building with me?
Yeah.
And anyway, long story short, I ended up backing off, but it was in front of, it got a little heated because I said, I said, do you want my opinion? And he goes, not on this. And I said, fair enough. But it got to a point where I had to be very clear. But I was trying to help the client in a way that I thought was best. But at the end of the day, he had a value statement that was different. Yeah. And that was fine. Now I'm over it. Yeah. But
it's hard to bite your pride at times. Yes. And maybe it's a little nuanced thing like the refrigerator in the cabinet, or they can be great big things. But if you have somebody that keeps saying no to the client, then the client thinks you're not listening. It's their house at the end of the day. And we tell our project managers, it's 3 strikes and you're out. Advocate for your idea. There's strike 1. They don't like it. Let's revisit it and here are the reasons why we think this is a good idea. Still don't like it. Revisit again a 3rd time. And if they say, look, stop, I don't want to do this, then do not ever bring it up again. It's their project. Find an alternative. There are other solutions to this too.
And that's where we got.
We joke around that, if we have to fight for this one idea and we don't have 4 others, then we're not good designers, right? So the idea is we have an endless number of ideas. Sometimes we think one idea might be better for a house, especially when you get into new construction, kind of world's your oyster, depending on how much space you have. Remodels, we love remodels because that confinement, the limitations can actually be really liberating, where it's like you're responding to something. When you have rules or certain variables are eliminated, it's pretty cool.
I love that you said that because recently we had some land that we bought and we were doing some rendering concepts with our architectural partner. And he's like, who's our intended client? And I'm thinking in my mind, okay, this area could handle an empty nester or could handle a young family. And I was like, oh, great. Now that's a big tree. And then it's like, is this a main floor living? Is this a 2-story? Anyway, we were paralyzed because it's like, because once you put something out there, especially marketing wise, in print media or social media, you can change pretty quickly. But anyway, you get the point. Yeah. I was like, this is actually, I haven't done a spec in a while. And one of the reasons I'm actually considering doing a spec here in the next 6 months, we'll see how it goes. But the reason I'm bringing it up is I haven't done a spec home since 2008. Yeah. And I still,
make decisions.
That was the hard part because I'm trying to predict what I think someone will want. I'm way better at getting you excited about what you want and then really filling in the gap and making everyone and then you're like, wow, this is amazing. That's really probably my number one asset, frankly, is getting everyone super excited.
But you're when you're doing a speculative home, you're the client, right? And you're also the builder. Yeah. So are you designing it for yourself or you're designing it for a profit to market it, right? It's the hardest project I have ever done in my entire career was remodeling our kitchen. I mean, my wife is an interior designer too, so we have opinions. But it was.
Well, we know who won that one.
Actually, I think I won that one.
Oh, well done.
At least in the kitchen.
In the kitchen.
Marital advice will be part 2 of this podcast.
But I think that if it was actually a wonderful learning lesson. When you're the decision maker. And you start bringing budget in and you're doing all these really cool fussy details with millwork and it's a 100-year-old house and you're trying to match stuff and to get it to seem timeless and perfect. Like, oh, how much is this going to cost? Like, oh boy, I'm not my client. I just realized that now for the first time. I can't design like I do for most of my clients. So you learn to back off. And then there's a liberation and freedom to that was so wonderful. And I'm sitting there, instead of getting mad about how much this darn thing was going to cost, it was like the sun came out in the middle of a storm and I had freedom for the first time about, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. I'm changing that detail. I'm going to fight for this one. And then my wife is going to handle all the other stuff, the colors, the details and all that. It was so liberating, but it was being on the other side of the table for the first time. It was eye-opening. I actually changed my philosophy on how I started to talk to our clients after a certain point, right when you start getting into the fun part, which is the numbers. And how much is this going to cost? that's where the advocacy really starts to ramp up. You start taking a step back a little bit, and it's not about the cool and the expensive. It's about how do we get you where you need to be to make this the most awesome home for you and whatever those expectations are. It's your house, right?
Yeah, I think you navigated it way better than I did. I asked my wife one time when I was
Fired,
because we remodeled our house, and I was like giving her my opinion. I said, in trying to think that this would help her listen to me. I said, people, Melissa, people pay me for my opinion. And she, without missing a beat, she goes, I'm not paying you. And I actually laughed. I'm like, that's actually pretty touche.
Yeah.
Colby, excited to remodel your cabin?
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, we didn't, as normally on these podcasts go, we didn't really cover any of the questions I wanted to talk about, but it was really insightful to hear. I think we focused a lot on, the mindset and the philosophy, which I think is really interesting. And regardless of what you do for a business, a lot of things that we talked about, you can apply to your own. We're actually going to do something new at the end of this that you usually asked rapid fire questions. This one is more, I really like quotes. And so I was just going to ask you both, I'm going to give you a quote that I've really resonated with and just kind of let you respond in your own words. And we talked about it actually a little bit earlier. And the quote was just simply, boundaries create freedom. How would you respond to that?
Good segue. As I kind of mentioned earlier, I mean, part of the reason I think we like remodeling is that there are boundaries, there are rules, and being able to, it feels good to be able to put a puzzle together that somebody else might look at and be like, I have no idea how this is going to work. Or how do we find some, create space in in confines? And some of that is trying to understand history. What's the motivation of what the original house was, and how can we bring that into today? But also even in just the business component of it. We have employees, we have clients, and we have to matchmake. And I think there's a gratification too of when the business feels like it's going very well, and we got to you assembled this great team. Right now it's there's a shortage of employees in kind of everything related to the residential market, it seems like.
Yeah, I saw on your website or LinkedIn, it says you're hiring.
Yeah. Okay. We found somebody.
Okay.
I guess you could, depends on who you ask, we could probably hire, 3-4 more. And Charlie and I wouldn't have to be working as much as we are, but that's also part of the designing the business. We actually put, you talk about boundaries. We've put some boundaries on ourselves. We've been larger. Right now we're at 9. We've been up to 12 or 13. 13 at one point, and we hated it.
Ugh.
It was awful.
Why the difference?
Partly it was selfish because Charlie and I were running from meeting to interview to site meeting. We weren't in the weeds drawing. We like to draw, as kind of Charlie alluded to. We're both we're business owners, but we're at heart, I think, worker bees. We love working. Just putting our heads down, drawing. We don't mind drafting. If we have a small firm, and so we have to wear a lot of hats. And so if we need to draft up some details, we're drafting up some details, and we're using a lower drafting rate, for our clients. Because again, it goes back to the value. It's not their fault that we don't have the drafters available at that moment. And so,
by the way, you should see the awesome window schedule I put together this morning.
I'm sure it's pretty good. But I lost my train of thought. But we capped ourselves at 10. We said 10 feels like the right number for us. We designed the office to have 10 workspaces. It's be very difficult for us to pack anybody else in. But that allows Charlie and I to stay involved in every project. And I think when clients come to us and they're interviewing us, not the staff, that they say, we want to make sure that you two are working, one of you guys are working on our project. And we have competitors that are 30 people, deep. And if anybody thinks that they're going to be getting a lot of principal time on those firms, it'd be crazy. And so we designed the business in that way. We put confines on ourselves, and I think that makes us happier, right? We can say, okay, yeah, maybe we're working too much, but we're doing what we love. And that's when you have people who are passionate about what they're doing and they love it, then, it's kind of cliche, but it doesn't feel like work.
Right. So, how would you respond to that quote, Charlie?
I would look at it a little bit more metaphorically. That's a really good question. If you have limitations and boundaries, it doesn't matter if it's in our skill set or anything else, going grocery shopping. Once those boundaries are set, it allows you to focus on the confines, right? You block out everything else that's around you and allows you to singularly focus on whatever that task is, getting Cheerios at the grocery store or a steel detail that you got to get to structural engineer. You just focus. I have, much like you brought it up earlier, the ADHD thing. I think everybody in our business has it to some extent. You are being barraged by a million things in one day, and you have to be able to multitask. You just have to. And some people it's easy, and some people it's difficult. I find it very difficult. But when those boundaries that I set on myself, I get in the office around 5:30. I have an hour and a half of peace and quiet. I do the accounting. I have this task. It is a boring checklist, but I do it every morning because that's how I get my brain to go. And when people start coming in, the phone starts ringing, the emails start popping up. I'm fresh and I'm ready to go, and I don't have to worry about the business stuff anymore. I can worry about the creative stuff. So
I think that's a great answer. Well, we could talk for hours and hours. You guys have a lot to share. We'll have to probably bring you on next year to see if you ever do expand beyond the 10, or if you'll have to double stack those desks. For those that are listening that are not familiar with you, we'll have everything in the show notes. The best places to reach out to you would, I assume, would be charlieandco.com.
You got it.
Yep. charlieandcodesign.com.
See, I don't even know what our way.
Yeah, he's so not.
Google will solve it. Yeah, Charlie and Co. Design, Minnesota, building, architect. It'll get there. We'll have it.
Coolhouses.com.
Thanks again for coming on. Appreciate your time. And thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mark.
We are happy to announce that we have a one-to-one coaching session that can be found on our Curious Builder podcast platform. So you can book a time with me, and it'll be 1 hour to ask any sort of questions that you want, talk about business, talk about life. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult client and you just want to maybe shop with another builder and say, hey, how do I handle this? Or maybe you're looking to rebrand your company. Whatever it might be, you can head to our website and book a time, and I'd be happy to sit down and give you that hour, and we can talk about whatever's on your mind. The podcast has now been running for the last 2 years, and it's because of people like you that are listening to the podcast, spreading the word, that our audience continues to grow. One of the ways that you as listeners can help support the show is head to our merch page, our shop page on the CuriousBuilderPodcast.com. You'll see that we have 3 different offerings now. We have a shirt that we partnered with Harnish on. We have a hat from BOGO that I use for ultra running. It's also just incredibly sweat resistant. So for if any of you guys are outside in the sun working, the hat looks great, but it's also extremely resilient to sweat. And then of course our Hive notebooks. These notebooks are amazing. I was given one a couple years ago and I've fallen in love with it. The paper's made out of stone. It's waterproof. It's tear-proof. It's amazing. So if you like what you listen to, if you appreciate the show and the content that we're producing, please head to the shop page. Buy a notebook, buy 2, give some to your employees, give some to the guys in the field. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder Podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at CuriousBuilderPodcast.com.